Hello, and welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast with your host, peak performance coach, Brian Bosley. Are you stuck on the hamster wheel of life, spinning and spinning, but not really moving forward? Are you ready to jump off and soar? Are you finally ready to sculpt your life? If so, you've landed in the right place. This podcast is created and broadcast just for you. All of you strivers, thrivers, and survivors out there. If you'd like to learn more about Brian and the Bamboo Lab, feel free to reach out to explore your true peak level at www.bamboolab3.com.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Bamboo Lab podcast. I'm your host, Brian Bosley, and today we're recording in May 23rd, 2023. We have an amazing guest on today, and before I introduce him, I want to read a heart letter that we received on May 11th. This Bamboo Pack member said, if you need something real, something raw, and something authentic and inspiring, plug into this podcast. I promise you won't be disappointed. I am my own worst critic and can be my worst enemy, but listening to this podcast helps me to reprogram the hardwired responses that have become a part of my psyche. Change your thoughts and your words and actions will follow. So I want to thank that Bamboo Pack member for writing in, and please thank you all for all the letters we receive each week and each day. As I always mention, I don't always get a chance to read them all on air, but every one of them have been read by me, appreciated, and saved in a file, and I do go back on them occasionally. So, all right, we have an amazing guest on today that he and I have had a chance to talk a couple of times. We have like 71 mutual connections on LinkedIn. We are kind of from the same mothership, a lot of mutual friends and business associates. We have Jason Grom on today, but before we introduce him, I want to say that this episode is dedicated to his grandmother. Grandma Net Anderson will be 99 years old this October, and I know she's listening in right now. So, Grandma, this is all for you, and I'd like to get you on here next October when you turn 100. We'll talk to you soon. All right, today we have Jason Grom on. So I'm going to read Jason's bio, which is a little bit unique. Jason Charles is from the House of Grom, first of his name, champion of harmony, learning guru, husband to the original gangster problem solver, father of 2 impressive kids, driver of continuous improvement, seeker of daily accomplishments, and learning in the flow of life. I love that when he sent that to me. I had to read that. Jason, technically, professionally, is Vice President of Coach Development and of the Advisor Business Development Group with Ameriprise Financial. This guy's got a ton of wisdom, a ton of cool stuff to share, and I just want to get right to it and say, Jason Grom, welcome to the Bamboo Lab podcast, my new friend.
Brian, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. It's an honor and a privilege that you reached out to me. I listened to a few episodes, the Ameriprise individuals that you've interviewed previously, and when you featured Brandon Haig, who happens to be somebody I've known for years and years and years, I reached out to congratulate him, and in regular Brandon fashion, I will describe as proactive, high power. He reached out to you and said, hey, you should have Jason on the podcast, and lo and behold, here I am today, excited to be here.
He's a good dude, man. He's a good egg, Brandon is. He was a lot of fun to work with.
Absolutely.
He's got a lot of energy, too. A lot of good, positive energy.
Absolutely.
Well, we had a chance to talk, what was it, last week, Jason? And we've talked for probably a half hour before the recording of today's episode. I've gotten to know a lot about you, and I've gotten to read your bio a couple of times. The more intense, the more informative bio that I didn't read out. So I've gotten to know you a little bit, but the Bamboo Pack doesn't know much about you, and a lot of them don't. So can you share with us a little bit about yourself? Where you're from, your childhood, family, etc. Who or what inspired you growing up? I'm going to let you take it away from here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. And the way that I'm going to frame up my background is through my values. My values are family, meaningful work, wealth, health, and faith. Starting with family, I grew up in a small town in northeast Wisconsin, Marinette, Wisconsin, borders on the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Menominee, Michigan, which I know, Brian, you have a connection to the Upper Peninsula and Michigan. I grew up with 2 supportive parents, loving and supportive parents. They're still my biggest cheerleaders to this day. I feel so thankful that they are a part of my life, that they were a part of my life in helping raise me, and still to this day I spoke with them this morning on my way driving into work to check in, see how they're doing, see what their plans are for the day and the week, and really stay connected. In addition, I feel very fortunate that I had my grandparents. My maternal grandparents lived 2 houses away from me. They were a big part of my everyday. They had an opportunity to be a part of, just the day-to-day activities because they lived so close, and a lot of family time together. My grandfather, and I'll talk about him a little bit later, passed away almost 15 years ago. But my grandmother, as you mentioned, and dedicated this episode to my grandma. She'll be 99 years old coming up this October. I have an older and a younger sister that we were about 2 years apart for all of us, and that was a good time frame because it gave us an opportunity to be close, but still in different grade levels, and had a lot of fun growing up with them. Marinette and Menominee, the 2 towns that border each other are relatively small towns, about 20,000 people. There's a lot of shipbuilding. Even the Staten Island ferry was built there a few years ago, and a lot of shipbuilding there, and a lot of paper making. And paper making was my family's business. My dad worked at Scott Paper, then was known as Kimberly-Clark for many years. Unfortunately, his position was eliminated, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But my grandpa, my maternal grandpa, he worked there as well at the paper mill. In Marinette, we love the fact that we were on the water. We spent a lot of time at our family's cottage. We call it Anderson's Breezy Points because there's always a nice breeze out there. Spent a lot of time outdoors at the land. We had some property that is still this undeveloped property that you could walk out there and be one with nature. A lot of sports, golf, baseball, basketball, football. Had the opportunity to play in high school and at different levels. And then our beloved vacation spots at Maiden Lake, which is about an hour west, where my family still vacations to this day. Unfortunately, our unit's no longer available, but it's a place we love going back to and spending time. From a family standpoint now, I'm married to my partner in life, Heather. We'll be married 13 years coming up in June. We met after my dad started a new job in my hometown, and losing his position resulted in him meeting my wife, and he said, "Hey, you should meet her." And most people say, I don't want to meet someone that my dad said I should meet, but I'm so glad that I did, and we've been together ever since. She's a senior quality engineer at 3M. She's a champion of our son Jack's food allergies. That's a big challenge that he has to face and we have to face, and she's such a champion of that, ensuring that he has what he needs and looking for ways to overcome these allergies so that he can live a more normal life, removing that fear and that concern. I'm so thankful to share our lives together with Heather, and we have 2 beautiful kids. Hannah, my daughter, she is a SAIL student, which stands for Students Accelerated in Learning. She's a scholar from a student standpoint and a school standpoint. She's a pianist in training. She just had a recital last week. She's an aspiring entrepreneur. She loves making things and selling things. And she's officially growing up too fast, moving into that tween space. My son Jack, he's a math whiz. He's amazing, the numbers he can remember and the math problems he can do in 2nd grade. He just turned 8 yesterday. He is that food allergy warrior, as I mentioned before, having to deal with allergies to eggs and milk and tree nuts and peanuts, but he's really making progress there, and we hope over time, once again, that he can not have those allergies. He loves competition, even a little bit too much at times, even to the point where yesterday we went out to the short course golfing on his birthday, and after the first hole, we had to leave because he was getting a little too intense. So we had to come back the next day to make sure that he's back in the place he should be.
When was
the
his
final
birthday?
thing I'll share from
When was Jack's birthday?
It was just yesterday.
Oh, well, happy belated birthday, Jack.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It turned out all right, but at the time when we had to leave the course, it felt like, all right, this is one of those parenting moments that is really hard, but it's the right thing because he needs to make sure that when he's out on the golf course, he has the right positive mental attitude. We watched the story of Bobby Jones recently, and of course, Bobby Jones, great amateur player and created Augusta National. He apparently had some temper issues on the golf course as well, but got some coaching along the way that he got that under control, and hopefully the same for Jack.
He'll get that.
The last thing I'll share in family is, of course, my in-laws, and when I married Heather, I also got the opportunity to be connected to Howard and Renee. They live in Menominee, Michigan. My father-in-law has construction experience, which I don't have, so it's great that we get to work on some things together, some construction activities. He loves to go fishing, which works well in our family because my son Jack and I love to go fishing. And my wife and daughter like to go as well. And my mother-in-law, Renee, she is such a hard worker. She is always there to help us out when needed. And even most recently, my wife had an audit at work, and she came out and helped for a few days and not only helped out with the kids, but did a number of things around the house and made some special treats for me, which I always love. Good. So that's family. And I know I spent a lot of time there, but it's my number one value. The second thing, and I'll talk about it more later, is meaningful work. I believe that learning and leadership is my calling in life. I have the opportunity to help others grow and develop each day, which gives me an opportunity to grow and develop each day. I feel very fortunate that Ameriprise gives me this opportunity. You described a little bit of in my bio and in my role. I get to focus on developing other coaches that are developing advisors. Pretty great that I get to do that every single day. From a wealth standpoint, the reason I highlight wealth is that I mentioned earlier that my dad had lost his job when he was at Kimberly-Clark. He was there 21 years. His position was eliminated. And ultimately, my parents are retired and everything's fine, but there were some challenging few years there. And when I got the opportunity to intern at American Express Financial Advisors in the late 90s and started to learn about the idea of helping people feel confident about their financial future, I said, hey, this financial services business is something that I'd like to get involved with, helping others and helping me and my family at the same time. From a health standpoint, I am a part of I think, Brian, you mentioned the 5 o'clock club. I have to read that book, but I exercise every morning. Today was my dumbbell exercises, but my health was really driven by a health scare, and I'll share a little bit more about that later. But my exercise, the diet, all of those components come together and are really critical and an important part of my values and what guides me. And then finally, and not least, my belief in God. I believe in God. I believe that helps me to have this optimism, this work ethic guiding my behavior, and not in a negative or suppressive sort of a way, but more in a positive and a potential sort of a way of the possibilities in life and seeing all the good that can happen in this world. And that's a big part of that drives me. So overall, hopefully that was helpful, Brian, from a background standpoint to frame it up. Those values are what guide me. And I know you're familiar with the values card sort activity. That helps to guide me every day and also describes who I am.
Well, God, we have to thank Doug Lennick and Think to Perform for giving us the opportunity to determine what our values are. I mean, Doug's values cards years ago helped me. You know, I was listening to yours, Jason, and my 5 values are family, my body, my mind, my spirit, and my impact on the world. And I look at that, and that's primarily we just word it differently, but they're almost identical. Yeah. At least 4 of them are identical. So I want to take a minute to thank Heather and Hannah and Jack for sharing her husband, and their father with us today too, by the way. So thank you, all 3 of you, for letting him come on this podcast. And for Howard and Renee, I go right through your town every once in a while. When I'm living in Escanaba, Michigan now. I don't spend a lot of time. I've been down in Detroit, Grand Rapids, and Lansing a lot over the past month and a half. But when I'm up there one of these days, I'll have to maybe stop in and say hello or grab a cup of coffee with your in-laws. Sometimes when I go through to sometimes I go to Green Bay or Appleton, but I just haven't been doing that as much over the last few months. So, well, good. So Jason, that's a really good encapsulation of who you are right there, where you came from, your values. I love that. It was perfectly done. Okay, growing up, man, what or who inspired you? What were some aha moments, books, people, whatever it might be, films? Yeah.
Well, I mentioned by name Howard and Renee. I should also mention by name my parents. I just referred to them as my parents. Gary and Barb Grom, which if you drop in to have coffee with them, you can just go 3 miles further into Marinette and visit my parents. And from an inspiration standpoint, they are and continue to be an inspiration. I thought for the purposes of sharing in the podcast that it would be helpful to spotlight a person that's no longer with us. And that person, I mentioned him earlier, is my grandfather, Jack Anderson. I looked up to him in so many ways. He passed away 15 years ago, but I literally think about him every single day. And part of the reason from a physical standpoint is that the wedding ring that I wear is his wedding ring. And then my wife had a jeweler add an element to it, so it became a part of our union together. And that's that physical piece that I take with me every single day. But it's not only that, it's the things I looked up to when I was with him. And first of all, he served our country during World War II in the 451st Anti-Aircraft Division of the Army. They started in Northern Africa, went up through Italy, then through France, Belgium, and Germany. And part of the reason that I know the details of this is he had a journal. He wrote in the journal every single day of the 3+ years that he was there. The purpose, from what I understand and why he did it, was to have something he could share with his mom in case he didn't make it. Well, thankfully, he did make it. And I, along with my mom and my uncle, transposed his entire journal and put that into an electronic format. So I know a lot of the details. I go back to and read components of it. And I also feel very fortunate that I'm the steward of his World War II artifacts. He has a ton of it that he brought back, and I have those in the basement and bring those out from time to time to look at that.
That is awesome.
In addition, it's awesome. And that greatest generation is really something I believe in. And those individuals that there's so few that are around at this point in time. And my grandfather's been almost 15 years ago, but there's very few of them left. But I love hearing about their stories. And I'm not saying that they were, this romantic, beautiful story. There's a lot of, we watched Saving Private Ryan together in the theater. My grandpa and I watched it, and he didn't say much when we walked out of the movie theater. He just said war is hell. And he was willing to talk about it, but seeing that and how vivid and realistic it was certainly brought back some very negative emotions and memories of what he experienced there.
Wow.
So that's one of the reasons that I looked up to him. I didn't end up serving in the military, but it's something that I highly respect, and I happen to mentor military veterans at this point in time. I'm looking for ways that I can give back, and that's a part of it. My grandfather also introduced me to the game of golf, and he first taught me the game of golf at our family cottage. We had a field that was on the back part of the property, and he'd teach me the game of golf, the swing and the tempo and all of those components. In addition, he helped me to be excited about watching the game of golf. And every time I watch golf on TV, and some people don't like to watch golf on TV, but wow, the PGA Championship this last weekend, getting a chance to see club professional Michael Block dunk a hole-in-one on the 15th hole, and then get an up and down from the crowd to make the top 15 and now get invited back next year. I'm thinking about my grandpa when I'm watching that, and so excited to be able to see golf. And I still love golf to this day. I believe I'm playing 2 times this weekend, one time at 6:48 in the morning, and I think on Saturday at 6:09. So very early in the morning, and I think about my grandpa every time I think about that.
That's so cool.
He also, he made everyone the center of attention. But he then became the center of attention because he made everyone else the center of attention. When you greeted him, you'd say, "Grandpa, how are you?" And he'd say, "I'm okay now," with such enthusiasm because he was happy to see you. He was focused on you. He had that impact on so many people, and people still talk about him to this day and the impact that he had on them. He, of course, had a significant impact on my mom, Barb, and my grandma, Net. But in addition, for my dad, Gary, his parents passed away at age 38 and 48. And for all intents and purposes, my grandpa was his dad for much of his life. And he misses him just as much as everybody else. And I'm so thankful that they had that relationship.
I think that what you
Sorry
said...
for getting a little emotional there, Brian.
No, man, I love it. I mean, I just love that your grandpa made others the center of attention. I've heard this many times, and I've tried to exemplify this. And when I was younger, I was a lot more arrogant and insecure. I know I didn't, but I was always taught to be far more interested than interesting. And when you are more interested in another person than trying to be interesting, those other people are going to find you more interesting. And I think that's amazing. I want to share something real quickly just go offline for a minute, because you had mentioned supporting veterans and things of that nature. And I want to shout out to an organization called the Patriot Promise Foundation, established by the former Air Force Major and current CEO, Bob Taylor. He was on the podcast a couple of months ago, and they have got a really cool process in this foundation starting to help acclimate, soldiers into the civilian world. So anybody who wants to help out and things like that, please Google the Patriot Promise Foundation. Really cool stuff they're doing. So, I wish I could have met your grandpa. I really, that would have been...
he was great. And the last thing I'm going to say about him, and then segue into the second person that really has had a significant influence and inspiration on me is playing the tuba. So when I was in sixth grade, I tried out a bunch of different instruments. A lot of people started in band at that age, and that was my experience as well. I landed on the tuba, and part of the reason behind it is I wanted to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather. He played in high school, and then even after World War II, he rejoined the Army for active duty and became the drum major and tuba player in the Army band stationed at Fort McCoy during the Korean War. So he really inspired me to play the tuba. And because I played a lot of sports in high school, and sometimes band isn't viewed as the coolest thing, the thing that the cool kids are doing, I wanted to quit. And I remember we were out at Little River Golf Course for a fish fry, and I talked to my grandpa about the fact that I wanted to quit. And his response was not, "You have to do this and you need to do this." It was, "Jason, well, I want you to be in the band, and I think you'd find great value from it. You need to make the choice that you want to make, that you think is the best fit for you, and I'm going to support you either way." And whether he was just saying that genuinely, which I believe he was, or trying to influence me, I ultimately decided to stay. And that, I'm so glad I did, because that gave me the opportunity as I graduated high school and in spring of 1996. Actually, I started in fall of 1996. I was admitted to University of Wisconsin-Madison. And I was a Badger fan, went to Badger football games. They had just come off winning the Rose Bowl. Barry Alvarez was there, so there was a lot of excitement there. And I also was well aware of the Badger Band and the legendary band director, Mike Leckrone, that had been there since 1969. Because I was in athletics and I was in the bands, that connection worked out pretty well to be a part of the UW band. So I got some advice from a current member, Nikki Locke, who was a member of the UW marching band. She played the euphonium, the baritone, and she gave me some tips during the summer. So August, when our Reg Week, as you call it, started, I did well. I did well in my audition with Mike. He thought that I played well, and then the marching went pretty well, because it felt very similar to football camp in the late summer that I was used to growing up. And then I met the tuba section, and we went over to this house over off campus, and they asked a lot of weird questions, and it seemed like a little bit of a fraternity sort of a situation. And I said, "Do I want to be a part of this?" And I called my parents and my grandpa and grandma and said, "Hey, I don't know if I want to be in this." And they said, "Hey, I think you should, but you got to do what you want to do. And you went here and wanted to be in that band, and I would encourage you to keep trying to make the band." Well, I decided to keep moving forward, and some of my best friends in the world, by the way, are from the marching band, and that fraternity sort of experience actually was a good experience for me. But I was in the band. I was not expecting to be on the field whatsoever, and I in the first week was asked to fill in for a senior that had to miss because they had some test or something going on. And I don't know why they had a test the first week of school, but for whatever reason, I was asked to march on the field in the first week. So I had no idea what I was doing. I had some music up there, and I needed to go in certain directions, but I could hardly read the charts and which way to go. And I'm going the wrong direction. And all of a sudden, this guy, Mike Leckrone, standing on this 20-foot tall podium with a megaphone, yells out, "Jason, watch where you're going." And I'm like, wait, he knows my name? He knew all of our names. And Mike, to this day, I pick up the phone and call him. He remembers me. He knows who I am. How he does it, I'm still not sure. He's going to be 87 years old coming up this year, but he knew my name. He cared about each and every person in that band and had extremely high expectations of us. So high that if we did something wrong, he'd say, do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. I say that over and over again because I heard Mike say that so many times. He even had what was called the dummy list. When you made a mistake in a live performance, he'd watch the tape. He'd put you on the list, not because he was calling you a dummy as a person, but that you made a mistake and that you could do better. We had this saying in the band called eat a rock. And some people might say, well, who wants to eat a rock? That sounds ridiculous. Well, the idea behind eat a rock is that if it were easy, anybody could do it. And we're not anybody. And we can do it. Eat a rock, keep driving forward. And that's something I still have with me to this day, that when the going gets tough, you just keep pushing forward. Mike also taught us a lot about performance. So my freshman year, I got a chance to perform on the Las Vegas Strip. So the Stardust Casino, Brian, you know the Stardust, or you remember hearing about it?
Oh, yeah.
No longer exists. Yeah. So we're on the Strip playing on the Las Vegas Strip. And Mike says to us, you know, these Las Vegas performers, they put on these shows hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, but that person in the audience sees it once. And you need to bring that level of performance to everything that you do. If you play On Wisconsin thousands of times, if you play even the kind of funny song, the Chicken Dance, which I did play at least hundreds, potentially thousands of times, it's the one time for them. You need to bring your best performance each and every day. And I still bring that to my work on a daily basis. The last thing I'll share about Mike, and this is definitely something I still take with me to this day, is this idea of moments of happiness. Life will not be all sunshine and roses, but the moments of happiness can get you through those rough times. I could probably fill a 24-hour podcast with all of the moments of happiness, but one in particular that I'll call out is January 1st of 2000. My last game in the marching band. I got the opportunity, along with Carrie and Paul. Paul was a drum major. Carrie was another tuba player with me, of leading the entire band out onto the field, onto the Rose Bowl. And such an amazing experience. The Badgers won. We were a few hundred yards away from the stadium, kind of looking down on the stadium a bit, and Mike gave his closing speech and said, take a mental picture right now. The people you're around, your friends, your family, if they happen to be around here, that Rose Bowl sign, take a mental picture of that. This is a moment of happiness you can take with you the rest of your life. And I literally can still, in my mind, see that picture, see that visual, see my friends, Tim and Rob, see my parents, my mom, my dad, my sister Megan got to come with, and my grandma and my grandpa. So Mike Leckrone inspired me, still inspires me to this day. My grandpa inspired me, still inspires me to this day. And there's so many more people that have inspired me. It was hard to narrow it down to just two, but I'm thankful for what they provided, and I hope that I can be an inspiration to others as well.
Well, I can tell that both your grandpa and Mike were, because we talked last week and we spent probably half of our time talking about those two gentlemen. So I really love it. I just want to encapsulate real quickly a couple of things that you have said so far that I think are important for the Bamboo Pack audience to hear. Number one, you started off today's episode talking about your values. Nobody has done that yet. This is our, 90th, 91st episode, somewhere in there. And I love that. And I really will really recommend to the audience to get on the website to Think to Perform. It's Think, the number 2, Perform. They have a values exercise you can do in there to help you determine what are your top 5 values, because that is the foundation for your life. I think it's so crucial. I know it has guided me a lot, and I've really been working on mine the last 3 years more and kind of fine-tuning and putting it into my words and my language. And every morning when I read my True Peak Identity, right before I journal and do my gratitude journal, I go through, my entire life is based on these 5 things. And I remind myself that. And a couple other things. Love how your grandpa made other people feel. He always made others the center of attention. And we live in look at TikTok and Facebook and whatever, Instagram. all these social media sites are designed for us to be the center of attention. And I know I put a lot of things about the podcast and, when we hit certain criteria on there, but when you're most influential is when you're sitting back making other people feel better about themselves, increasing their sense of self-worth. I love that. And I really love the term eat a rock, man. I think that's so simple, so basic. When you said that, I was like, what the hell, where is this going, man? And I'm like, I love it. But also, for those people who are out there in the world of your work, whether you're in front on a stage or not, you do your job thousands and thousands and thousands of times. But for people who are benefiting from your work, they only get to see it once. So make sure that you bring your A game every single time. That was a really good, when you were talking about that, I was like, okay, that's true, because I do a lot of coaching sessions, and I do obviously the podcast now, but some people will only hear this a handful of times. So, and then moments of happiness, man. I think that's so good to take those mental pictures and remind. That's why I think, keeping a gratitude journal in your life is so important, because you're literally on paper capturing moments of happiness right there. And when you do that, when you take those moments, Jason, as you remember this from 2000, that was 23 years ago, dude. And you remember that moment.
Yeah.
I mean, when you actually take and encapsulate that moment, then you start seeing other moments of happiness in your life, and they start to build up. And all of a sudden, we're not looking at all the negative things that media and social media and other people want to share with us. We're seeing the beauty of the world and the beauty of life. So I think those were some great capsulations right there.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, you said it great. I so appreciate you bringing that all together, because those are those elements that anybody could apply. You don't have to be in the University of Wisconsin marching band or have Jack Anderson as your grandpa. It could be applied in anyone's life.
It's funny. I'm here doing this episode out of Lansing, Michigan. And I remember in high school, my junior year, the first college football game I've ever seen in my life was, it would have been maybe 1983, somewhere in there, was the Michigan State Spartans against the Wisconsin Badgers. And it was when, I think it was Lorenzo White played for Michigan State. That sounds about right. Sure. And I don't know who won the game. Yeah. I remember watching that game. So that Wisconsin and Michigan State were the two teams, the first two college football games I've ever seen in my life. So anyway, okay, next question with this one, Jason, is, and I always kind of frame it, you can take the time frame 1, 2, 3 years. I'd like you to share with the audience what in the last year to 3 years has been your greatest learning. What have you learned, man?
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. And that question is one that I actually ask my kids every single day. So I have this weekly post that I do, and the hashtag is learning in the flow of life. And what we do every night, and this ties in, Brian, to your journaling, is I ask them 2 questions. I said, what made you happy today? And what did you learn today? I'm trying to help them see the opportunity to learn in every moment, but I need to answer the question as well. And pinpointing one thing in the past 12 months is challenging, but something that just keeps popping up in my life in so many different ways is the idea of strengths. And I was introduced not 12 months ago, but 20 plus years ago, just a little bit after that Rose Bowl, to Clifton Strengths Finder. Mm-hmm. I was at that point, early on in my career, trying to figure out my value proposition, what I brought to the table. And I took the assessment along with what color is your parachute and disc and a bunch of other things. I'm sure millions of people have taken those assessments, but what do you actually do with it? What I did with it is I focused on taking the themes that were identified and turning those into strengths. The idea behind Strengths Finder is unlocking your potential and becoming who you were meant to be through developing those themes into strengths. My top 5 are responsibility, harmony, includer, achiever, and discipline. Now, there's a description behind each of those, and really how I started the process of development along these lines was to get to know what are each of these 5 themes. What is responsibility? What's harmony, includer, achiever, and discipline? The words themselves are somewhat descriptive, but there's more detail that's provided. So you get some level of knowledge component, but then you have to shift that into skill and practice and repetition. And an example for me, discipline happens to be one of my top 5. So when you think about daily habits, and I know Brian Moore had mentioned Atomic Habits. It's a book that certainly has had influence on a lot of people, myself included. what are those things that you do on a daily basis and you consistently execute? Because I happen to have discipline in one of my top fives, that actually is somewhat easy for me to do. So I could just say, well, I'm good at discipline, so I'll just do a couple things and not do much more. No, instead, I'm leaning into it. Some of the things I do on a daily basis: I stretch, I read a daily devotion, I read a book, I exercise, I finish my shower with cold water therapy, I eat a smoothie that is very healthy, I practice my golf swing. I even floss, for that matter, and I know all of our dentists around the world would love the fact that I floss and would love everybody to floss. I read with the kids. I ask them those questions about learning and happiness. When you look at that example for me, it is about me, but think about for every single person out there. If you could take an assessment like that, which identifies where you have natural talent, it also identifies things that you're interested in. You combine things you're naturally good at, plus you're interested in. Now, if you lean into those things, it's not going to be this matter of pulling teeth, bringing back to the dentist analogy. Instead, it's going to be things that you like to do and you want to do. And if you lean into them, you have the potential to become an expert. And in the book, and the original book is now Discover Your Strengths. And since then, they have a number of other books that have been highlighted, Strengths Finder 2.0, for example. The idea behind it, they give an example of Colin Powell and how great of a speaker he was. And you think about, he had some natural talent towards it, and he practiced and he prepared. We have some amazing speakers in Ameriprise, and we had one of them give some advice to the coaches I work with recently. And I think some of the newer coaches were surprised at how much practice and preparation he put into it. He just doesn't walk onto the stage and it just happens. He has some natural talent, but he focuses on his skills. And I believe so much in this Strengths Finder focus that every person I work with on my team goes through it. Not only do they go through it, we talk about it. We discuss their themes, how they want to focus on building those into strengths. And it's something that if you don't feed it, if you don't focus on it, you're not going to turn these into strengths. It's going to be another assessment that you took and you maybe didn't do anything with. But this is an example that's been hugely beneficial to me, and I want to continue leaning into my strengths, helping others through responsibility, harmony, includer, achiever, and discipline, and becoming more of who I was meant to be through leaning into these strengths.
Jason, I think if I can, I'm going to try to see if we can include the link to Strengths Finders on the show notes for today. So if anybody out there, look in the show notes today. We're going to try to include that so you can get on there and buy the book or take the assessment or I think, Jason, yeah. I think if I'm not, I took this a couple of times, and the last time was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and I took it because I knew I was going to be a guest on someone else's podcast, and they were going to discuss it.
Right.
And I think mine were learner, connector, or connectedness. I know achiever was one of them, and I don't know what the other one was. Activator or communication or something like that. So I'll have to go back and dig through that. My books are in storage right now, and that's where I just bought the book, and after I read it, I took it online for the second time. But again, a lot of people that I know in really powerful places, or at least very successful people I know, well-rounded people I know, are very into the Strengths Finder. So I think that's an incredible. I just want to go back to something you said at the beginning, though. We kind of brushed it over. Yeah. Listen to this, Bamboo Pack members. Every night he asks his children, "What made you happy today, and what did you learn?" Tell me that those two questions, whether you do them at the end of the day before bed or first thing in the morning and recap the past 24 hours, what a couple of powerful questions, man. I right now I'm looking at this. What made you happy? I do that with my gratitude journal, but I'm gonna start putting in that question. What did I learn in the last 24 hours? I love that, because you think about that. You do that every day over the course of a year. You have 365 learnings that you've documented. Yeah. Even if you do it 3 times a week, you still have 156 learnings. That's a lot. If you want to look at your life today and say, okay, I want to be dramatically better in a year, and you can capture 365 learnings, I mean, there's a huge stepping stone for you becoming a better person. I love that. I absolutely love that. That's cool as shit, man. Good stuff.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's been fun to see is I started doing that with my daughter, who's 11, being a little bit older, and thought that was the type of thing I do with her. And then I'd read to my son. And my son, who just turned 8, as we talked about, he started hearing us having these conversations, and he said, I want to be a part of that. So he wants to be a part of that conversation, and he wants to share what made him happy and what he learned. And it's something he was motivated to do because he saw us doing it and wanted to be a part of it. So it was great that he asked to be a part of it versus me saying, hey, you need to do this thing.
Well, Hannah and Jack, you are a couple of very lucky young folks, man. So that's an incredible start to life. What made you happy today? What did you learn today? It's that simple, folks. Sometimes becoming a new, improved version of yourself sometimes it's not some grandiose idea or some aha moment. It's just one simple piece of advice. And there's a piece of advice right there that can dramatically change your life 365 days from now. There's no doubt. There's no doubt in my mind. I love that so much. I used to ask Dawson, because I used to walk my son to school. We lived exactly a mile from from kindergarten through at least to middle school. I didn't walk him to middle school because he was getting a little older, but I'd walk him there and I would ask him, what'd you learn today? What did you learn today? Because I started off by saying, how was your day? Good. Okay. What, anything happened? No. But then when I said, well, what, then he would start off by saying, I don't know. And I'd say, well, think about it. You learned something. And then it came to walking to school. I'd say, okay, what can you do to me? And what I would do, Jason, is I made my son's lunch every day. And for, I'm going to say 6 years, 7 years, whatever, or more. Yeah. And every day I would put a note in there. And it would be like, okay, I want you to focus on making one person smile today. And then I've saved all those things. I call them lunchbox learnings. And I saved all those. They're in a box somewhere in my storage unit right now. And so he'd open it up, and then he'd sit after a while that all of his buddies would say, what'd your dad say today? What was the lesson today? What quote did he give you today? And he was like in 5th grade at this time, and then right around 7th grade, he started doing in-school lunch, so we didn't do that as much. But anyway.
I love that.
That's awesome, man. I love that stuff. All right, Mr. Grom, now we're going to the heart of the interview here today, the podcast, and that is the question that I really love to ask people. You can refuse to answer if you'd like, but the question is, what is the most difficult thing you've gone through in your life, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so I'm very willing to answer it, and I feel very fortunate and blessed that while I've faced challenges, I'm certain there's others that have faced bigger challenges. But for me, I mentioned earlier that my paternal grandparents, my dad's parents, Marvin and Joyce, they passed away at 38 and 48 years old. So great that my grandma has this longevity, going to be 99, my mom's mom, and my grandfather lived to be 88. But they passed away at 38. My grandma had cancer, and my grandfather died of a heart attack at 48. I was about the age of my grandmother, Joyce, and I started having some symptoms, some health symptoms that made me think that this was it. Like, this was my time. My grandmother passed away at that age, so it's my time, and I'm not going to be somebody that's going to be around for decades and decades and decades. I remember not only feeling terrible physically, but I was getting to the point of hyperventilating, and I'm a pretty calm person in general. I remember my wife giving me a paper bag, and I was sitting on the couch in the room separated from the rest of the family. My daughter Hannah was just a toddler at the time, and I was hyperventilating. I was really scared about what was going to happen, and was I going to be a goner? How was my family going to be taken care of? What are all the things I still wanted to do in my life? I remember in particular, I was at the Ameriprise Leadership Conference, and 2 leaders came up to me and said, wow, Jason, you look really good, because I had lost some weight. But the reality is that I was losing weight because I could not retain the nutrients in my food based upon what was going on. And my wife encouraged me to go to the doctor, and I finally did go. And when I went, they did a number of different tests for food allergies and a number of different things, and ultimately recommended a colonoscopy, which I know a lot of people at a certain age, that's just something that you do as preventative. But I was in my late 30s and not something that you'd normally done. The extent of my medical care previously was shots as a kid, and I tore my ACL. So I did have one surgery. I tore my ACL playing basketball, and certainly wasn't looking forward to that. But that's all I had gone through. And I'm guess admitting this for all of the Bamboo Pack that's listening. When I was a kid, I may have tried to run away from home when I was getting a shot because I was fearful of needles. So I'm an adult now at this point in time, concerned about, am I going to be a goner? Concerned about this procedure, having this colonoscopy. Part of it was about the colonoscopy, but really the outcome. What were they going to tell me? Well, there was good news here. The good news, and this may not sound like good news, but the good news was that I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. And the doctor shared a treatment plan that included multiple medications to start and then moving back to one medication that I still take to this day. And oh, by the way, back to that comment about being afraid of needles, I give myself a shot every 2 weeks. So I went from running away from home to actually putting the needle into my body and being perfectly okay with it. The steps I took personally, I prayed many times for a good outcome, and I prefer not to have Crohn's disease, of course, but I'm so thankful to God, to my family, to the doctors, and also it's caused me, it's that significant emotional event that's caused me to focus on my health more so than I ever have before. I'm gluten-free. I've been gluten-free for ever since then. It's something I've removed from my diet, and there's studies that would say, yeah, it helps or it doesn't help, but I haven't had symptoms since. It's not just about being gluten-free. It's about how we eat. And my wife, the food that she makes and the food that we eat, very healthy, lots of fruits and vegetables and fresh food. That makes such a huge impact. And the medication, I'm certain, helps. The life choices certainly help. The support from my family, the prayer helps. At some point in the future, the symptoms will likely come back. I know a lot of individuals with Crohn's disease that have to have surgeries and change medications all the time because they have such horrible and debilitating symptoms. They may come back at some point. They likely will come back at some point, but that was a challenge that I faced. I will have to face at some point in the future, but I am prepared. And part of the reason I live the way I live right now is to ensure that I have one more day without those symptoms, feeling healthy, feeling energized, and really a long ways away in time and experience from what I experienced in being diagnosed with Crohn's.
Dude, isn't it ironic that it happened right at the same age your grandmother was when she passed away, though?
Yeah,
That's so insane. And it's so insane how that psychological impact. I remember when I turned 35, and that was when my father died. And I remember getting to that age, and I remember I was in that kind of that same thing you were. I didn't have any physical illnesses or ailments, but then I remember when my daughter turned. My daughter turned 4.5. And that's the age I was when my dad died. I had that thing again. I had that before then. And it's a weird dynamic, man. I'm just glad you're dealing with it. I think, being gluten-free and all those things, because I don't know a lot about Crohn. It's an inflammation of the GI tract or something. What exactly is it in a nickel version?
Yeah. So it's an autoimmune disease that's an inflammation. Crohn's in particular, or IBD, irritable bowel disease, is an inflammation for me of the small intestine. So the body basically is fighting what it believes to be an attack and becoming super inflamed and causing a lot of symptoms. I would be up at all times of night. And as I mentioned, at one point, I wasn't able to actually even retain the nutrients in my food. And I was losing weight. And I'm about the same weight I was when I was not feeling well. But that's because I'm now much more healthy versus at that point, I was not able to retain the nutrients in my food.
Okay. All right. Wow. Well, I'm glad you're doing better, taking care of it, because we need you here for a few more decades, my friend. We definitely do. So, all right. So another question for you is, you're progressing here in life, young kid, born and raised with parents and grandparents, around 2 sisters. You've really based your life on some cool stuff. I can tell you're a very self-aware guy. I love the fact that you have your values. You take these moments of happiness. You're passing that on to your children, and all these things, great things you're doing. Your position with Ameriprise has changed lately, and you get to coach the coaches now. in a vice president's role. What's next for you? Or no, I'm sorry, I don't want to go there yet. What's a win for you? Like, when you look at life, what's a win for me? So, go ahead.
A win for me, it would be first and foremost the top of my list with my kids, my family, and I could spend a ton of time talking about that. As you think about on the work front, and I describe this as my calling in life. There's an audio book that's connected to Strengths Finder. It's by Tom Rath, and he's the grandson of Donald Clifton, who created Strengths Finder. It's a short, audible book called "It's Not About You." And the book highlights how we can gain fulfillment through helping and serving others. And as you mentioned, I get a chance to help train, coach, and develop thousands of financial services professionals over the course of my career. I started at Strong Investments and had an amazing experience there. They were purchased by Wells Fargo funds, and I had a good experience there, but ultimately decided to, I guess, for all intents and purposes, come back to Ameriprise following my leader, who I worked with at Strong and met on my first day there. A win for me at work requires two parts. One is that leaders see the value in the work and my teams are doing and invest in what we do. So the fact that the leadership team here is investing in me and my team, focusing on developing these 60 coaches, that's a win for me. When I hear about how individuals I've trained or coached or developed are doing today and they reach out and thank me for it, that's probably the biggest motivator there. So the two parts, the leadership team and or whoever's investing in me, the time or the money, see value in it. And then when people reach out and say, hey, you had an impact on me. And you mentioned that I haven't been in this coach development role for that long. It's just over 5 months at this point. Just like a lot of people do, I announced the move from a role standpoint, still at Ameriprise, over LinkedIn. And there were a lot of likes and a lot of comments in public. The comment that struck most was a private message that was sent to me by a person I trained about 20 years ago. And I actually have the note up here in front of me. I'm going to read to you what he shared. He said, hey, Jason, been a long time and saw the post about your new position, so wanted to drop a line and say hi. We've come a long ways since the electronic manual and Y-cording, but in the end, it all started with you, my friend. After all these years, just wanted to say thank you for giving me the start you did. There's no way I would have been able to do what I did, handle the situations I have, and get to where I am now without your help. Congrats on your new role. You certainly deserve it. Take care.
Oh, man. That's what we do it for right there. The impact we have on other people. That's great, man. And I'm so, you mentioned, there's a couple of companies out there, and I coach a lot of companies, and I've loved almost every one of them, but there are two companies that really focus a lot on investing time, energy, resources, and money into the growth of their people, and that's Ameriprise Financial, which is obviously our mothership for you and both me and you. That's where I started. And another firm, CG Financial. Those two companies of the 27 years I've been coaching, I've really been impressed by the amount of resources they will put into getting their people developed to do the best possible job for the clients. So it's great. You couldn't be at a better company, I don't think. I really don't.
I agree. And the opportunity to get to do this every single day, I'm having a ton of fun. I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and I'm making an impact. And the leaders are seeing the value in it, and the individuals that I'm coaching see value in it. And I wouldn't be surprised, and my goal would be that 10, 20 years from now, some of the individuals I'm working with right now reach out in a similar fashion. Maybe it won't be LinkedIn. Who knows what the venue will be for interacting at that point in time, but it motivates me. I want to continue doing this and have an opportunity to do this for decades to come.
Well, it goes back to what you said at the beginning, that you have a learning and leadership are your calling in life. And I really believe when you said the word calling right away, I knew that you love what you do. And I do believe that people who have jobs are lucky to have a job and making money. People who have professions are fortunate, but those who have a calling are extremely blessed, where it's a true calling and it was a destiny that you are fulfilling. I think there's such a beauty in that. And I think anybody out there, whether you have a job you don't like, you have a calling out there. there's a calling, and it goes back to, an episode we did recently on the true peak identity, finding out how do you scale the walls of mediocrity in life and find that true calling.
Yeah.
I loved when you said that at the beginning, and I noted that and wrote it down, that learning and leadership are a calling in my life. So that's where you see a win right now in your professional life, is when you see the leaders, and I mean, really kind of the leadership, providing the resources and seeing the value of what you guys do, as well as the other coaches and advisors that you're impacting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. All right. This is my favorite question. And I'm thinking about the time frame here, but let's say I were to fly over to Minnesota today, and I bring my time machine. We're going to get in and we're going to shoot back to maybe like when you were just getting out of, you were that final 2000, you're looking you're taking that moment of happiness. You're seeing your parents, your grandparents, your friends, and you're at the stadium. Maybe that's a time frame. But what would you say to your younger version self, that young Jason Grom? If you had to give yourself words of wisdom, recipes for success, or some advice at a younger age, what would you say to yourself?
What I would say to myself, if everybody remembers Aesop's fable, The Tortoise and the Hare, the tortoise always wins the race. And when you think about, I'm so thankful of so many things that I've accomplished, so many experiences I've had, but like anyone else, I've had setbacks. When I graduated college, when I graduated high school, I was excited about the potential of earning this scholarship from my dad's employer. It was a scholarship for $20,000 that would have gone a long ways to covering the cost at UW-Madison. I didn't get the scholarship. I also didn't meet the woman of my dreams, Heather, until I was almost 30 years old. And I wondered if I would find the right person that I could spend the rest of my life with. I was overlooked for leadership positions at multiple points throughout my career, and a lot more. And if I go back into that time machine and say, Jason, remember, the tortoise always wins the race. Now, I'm not saying I necessarily see myself as a tortoise, not the physical animal, but I'm a bit of a Star Wars fan, by the way. And I think about that somewhat similar looking character, Yoda. He's a Jedi master. He lived 800 years and was not only respected for his wisdom, but his actions and his teaching of so many. It's a little bit of a tortoise type character. I'm incredibly blessed and happy with what I have. I have so many moments of happiness, but I've definitely had those moments, those setbacks where it's like, is this ever going to turn out in the direction that I want it to be? And remember, Jason, the tortoise always wins the race. Keep moving forward, one step at a time, and good things will happen.
Well, I think that's beautiful. I think what you're describing is taking the long view of life. I love the quote, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. What I read about Warren Buffett, between the ages of 83 and 86, he earned more money in those 3 years than he did his first 66 years on this earth. And I don't think he won. He was in his late 50s before he really started becoming successful. And you hear those stories all the time of that they just took the long view. They were able to take the slips and they handle the obstacles and deal with the failures along the way, and seeing failure as like an obstacle, not a reason to slow down.
Right.
And there's a book I'm reading right now called Be Fearless by Jean Case. I think she's way up there at Nat Geo. And the book is really good. It talks a lot of case studies of people who being fearless. Really, her book isn't about not having fear. It's about being able to overcome failures. The whole book is case study after case study of all these incredible people who have had major impacts and inspired and changed the world, and how much failure they have faced. But the key element is they had that long view. They were just going forward.
Right.
Like one person said, I think it was I think it was Bezos. He said, or maybe it was Bezos or the guy from Virgin Airlines. I forget his name. Branson, right? Yeah.
Branson, yeah.
One of them, I think it was, said, if you fall flat on your face, that at least means you've been moving forward. I mean, I think that's really cool, right, man. I think I love that. I love that.
I like that.
That's really a good one. Well, what's next for you?
Well, what's next for me? So my mantra of learning in the flow of life gives me optimism to grow and learn each and every day. few years back, I read a little bit here and there, but I've become a reader. I read a book every single day, and last time I checked, there's an endless supply of books to read. Even here in Minneapolis, we're moving to another office coming up in the next few weeks. So people are downsizing. They're getting rid of their old books and the like. This is a great opportunity for me because I've already collected about 30 books from other people that now I have probably near 50 that are on my reading list. I just finished this morning the book Power of Regret by Dan Pink. Have you ever read any of Dan's books?
I've read some of Pink's books, but I've not read that one.
Yeah, and the book was great. It starts by talking about the people that have tattoos or say, I have no regrets. He disputes their thinking and highlights that there's benefit to regret. He talks about 4 different types of regret. There's foundational, like you didn't put enough effort in. Boldness, you didn't, move forward, like that Richard Branson example. Moral regrets you might have, or relationship or connection type regrets. He's not telling people to wallow in their regrets and say, oh, woe is me, but it's more about the opportunity to learn and grow through those regrets, through just disclosing that, hey, I have regrets, to yourself and to other people, and then have some compassion and try to distance yourself from the regret and say, all right, well, what can I learn from this and what can I do with this? So just like any other book I read, I have to take what I've learned through it, the knowledge I've gained, and now I need to think about how can I apply that into my day-to-day. And that's the book I just finished today. I've got my next one teed up. I don't know if you ever heard of The Inner Game of Golf. I love the game of golf, and I also love coaching, and I know you love coaching as well. There's a book called Coaching for Performance by Sir John Whitmore, and he references this book, The Inner Game of Golf. And my golf game could be better. I've been practicing a lot, but haven't been improving as much as I'd like to. So I'm hoping that I can get something through that. Now, one would argue reading a book to get better at your golf game. Well, the mental part of your game is so huge in the results that you have. So I'm hopeful that I can gain some benefit from that. Bottom line, you asked what's next. Continuous learning, tackling challenges in new ways, looking at things differently, learning through my kids, becoming a better dad, a better husband, a better coach, better leader, and not from the standpoint of feeling like I'm lacking and bad, but instead from the view of optimism and growth and strength.
Well, I really love, because it's so amazing when I talk to guests like you, Jason, and reading comes up so often in the guests that I work with, especially the ones who really are making a big impact on the world. And I get so disgruntled when somebody says, I don't know how you read so much, Brian. I don't have time to read. And I'm like, we watch 27 hours on average of TV a week in America. We spend 17 hours a week on social media. We have almost a full work week that we have in front of us. We do have a full work week. Almost 40 hours we spend on some type of media. We have all kinds of time to read. It's just a matter of taking the time. Yeah. I do want to get you a copy of the 5 a.m. Club by Robin Sharma. I'm going to get that in your hands. I got to get a copy of that in your hands. So, I just looked. I do have the Power of Regret in my Audible book collection. I must have gotten it at one time, but I have not listened to it yet. Because I do, when I travel, I either have a podcast. I don't listen to music in my Jeep very often, but I do listen to podcasts or books on tape because it just makes the time go by faster. But I prefer to hold a book in my hand. But sometimes you just can't do that. I love
and it's a quick listen or read. It was only about 210 pages. Took a lot less time than the book Sabrina recommended, Atlas Shrugged. I did follow her recommendation and read it, and that was 1,168 pages. That's a lot.
You read that book since Sabrina's episode aired?
I did, yes.
Holy, that book, I've read that, I think, 3 or 4 times, and it took me like 6 months to read it the first time. I mean, that book is deep, philosophically deep and challenging, and you got to really follow the storyline. I mean, I give you credit for reading it, since that was only not even 2 months ago, I think, when I interviewed Sabrina. But wow, that's great.
Well, the credit I will start with is my wife, who told me to read it 13 years ago, and I didn't read it at the time. And the stars were aligning when I heard Sabrina mention it and got a chance to read that. And this Daniel Pink one is a little bit shorter, but I mean, ultimately, just I think Brian Mora mentioned it on his episode, that it's becoming a reader. It's not about, I want to read more. It's, I'm a reader. I read every day. I don't need to take 2 hours a day to read. I literally take 30 minutes to read every single day. And you made the point about how do you spend your time? Look at what your phone says as far as how much time you're spending on your phone and social media and the like. And you definitely have the time. You just need to use it differently.
100% agree. I mean, books, podcasts, audiobooks they're the gateway to the next level of life. They really are. I mean, I know hands-on learning and all incredibly important, but we can't do that every day. You can't when you're in your car, you can't do hands-on learning. When you get up in the morning, you're not necessarily going to do hands-on learning, or at night. That's the time you pick up a book or throw an audio book or a podcast in and just listen. Get some. I love Joe Rogan, not because I don't get inspired by Rogan's, but I get informed. Yep. So I want to get informed. I listen to him. If I want to get inspired or educated, I listen more to a Mel Robbins or an Ed Milet podcast. Things of that nature. But, well, it's good. It's good to hear another fellow person out there picking up the books. And when you say you're learning in leadership or that's your calling in life, I mean, that's the best way to become a better learner and a better leader is pick up a book. All right. Yeah, I love this. Absolutely. I love this last question too. Because it it captures anything that we didn't discuss. So the last question I have for you, is there any question that I didn't ask that you wish I would have, or any final message you want to leave with the Bamboo Pack members out there?
Yeah. So when you think about different things that you've accomplished in your life and or things that you, back to the power of regret, didn't try, a lot of times what's driving that is this imposter syndrome. And every one of us experiences it. I experience it now. I'll likely experience it in the future. And the story I'd like to share is a recent example when a few years ago, our kids were getting to an age where they're still very busy, but I was having a little bit more opportunity to give back. I had done some volunteer work previously, but I was looking to give back. And I connected with Ameriprise Community Relations and was looking for an organization that I could participate in, more skills-based volunteering based upon my expertise. And they connected me with this organization called Help at Your Door. Help at Your Door is a Twin Cities-based organization. The mission is to help seniors and those with disabilities remain independent in their homes through grocery delivery, transportation, and then home services like bringing their garbage from the garage down to the street or raking their yards. The mission of the organization connected with me because of my grandmother. And as I know, we dedicated this episode to my grandma. The reason my grandma's able to stay in the house that she and my grandfather built is because my parents are 2 houses away. And they do a lot to help support her. And she is so thankful for that. She has a couple other services that she uses, like Meals on Wheels. But in Marinette, Menominee, small town, there really isn't a Help at Your Door type service available. So I was immediately connected to the mission of the organization, and the executive director and the chair of the board of directors, a volunteer board of directors, said, "Would you like to be on the board of directors?" And it's like, wow, you want me? Sure, I'd like to try that. And I walked into the first board meeting and I saw current and retired executives from Cargill, General Mills, Allianz, attorneys, finance leaders. I didn't think I belonged. It took me a few months, but once I figured out the needs of the organization, then I had this moment of, well, yeah, I can help here. If I focus on my strengths, if I learn about the organization and the needs and what actually will help the organization grow and help more seniors remain independent in their home, then, and I'm motivated by the value proposition, I should be able to add value here. And now I'm the vice chair of the board. I'm confident I've added value. We just had our spring gala recently, and I have some connections who have skills in video, and they helped create a video for the gala. I've recruited volunteers. I've recruited board members. And right now, by the way, let this be the official call out. We are looking for board members. And whether it's to be a board member on Help at Your Door or whatever it is that you would like to accomplish, you belong. You have skills. You can add value. That imposter syndrome is something that everyone experiences at different points in your career. I've talked to some of the most successful people that you could probably ever imagine, and they still have some element of that. Am I adding enough value? Am I driving enough impact to others? And sometimes that is a good thing from a motivation standpoint because it fuels you. But if it causes you to have paralysis, it's not a good thing. And it took me a bit to hit the ground running with Help at Your Door, but I feel like I'm adding value now and excited to continue to add value to that organization.
You just hit on one of the most, I think, destructive habits that I see amongst my client base, and that is the imposter syndrome. I'm so glad you brought that up. I always equate, when I work with my clients, and I've been working with a particular group of clients on this the past few weeks, on the fears of success. And there are 10 primary reasons why a human being fears success. And it's so ingrained in so many of us. And one of those is the imposter syndrome. In fact, it's the largest reason why we fear success. And I think the way I always look at it, Jason, is when you're in line, you're like at a grocery store, there are two lines. There's the success line and there's the failure line. And for some reason, you find yourself in the success line. And you're happy about it, but you're so nervous that you're going to get a tap on the shoulder and someone's going to say, hey, Jason, we have made a mistake. I apologize. We put you in the wrong line. You actually deserve to be over in the failure line. And you're always looking over your shoulder. I have fought that. And I fight that. I told you in the before we started recording today, as the podcast started growing, I've been really facing that a lot over the past, I'm going to say 4, 5, 6 months, working through that stage of resilience as I grow. And it's nefarious. And I'm going to share with everybody, if you can find a bookstore or get online, Harvard Business Review puts out a magazine every quarter. They do a summer, spring, fall, and winter issue, I believe. Well, the one that just came out for summer of 2023 is dedicated to how to overcome imposter syndrome. There are dozens of articles, and they're written by experts and behavioral scientists and neuroscience and psychologists on the subject of what imposter syndrome is and how to overcome it. If you don't think you have it, you probably have it, or you have had it, or you're going to have it in your life. So I'm so happy you brought that up because very few guests have brought that up. I've had a couple, but I love that as a final learning. If you could, I'll put you on the spot, Jason, on this. If you could give 1 or 3 pieces of advice, if I'm or somebody is facing imposter syndrome, what do you say are just 1, 2, or 3 things someone can do to help them to move forward and overcome that?
I think it comes back to learning, and I know it might be the answer that I give on many circumstances because I believe so firmly in it, but it's about learning what does success look like. So whether it's joining a board or in a new role, learn about what does success look like. Ask others around you to find out what is it that makes them successful? What is it that makes what does success look like in the role itself? That's the first part. The second part is just keep taking one step forward. It's not this giant leap. And I know in your last episode, you talked about that leap over the wall. Well, still the way that you're going to get over that wall is take one step, one step, one step. So just keep moving forward. That tortoise always wins the race. And then tie it back to what motivates you. What actually motivates you? What is it that is fueling you? And when you think about what's fueling you, and I started with my values of family and meaningful work and health and wealth and faith, when you have those values guiding you and motivating you, you gain strength and you will move forward much quicker. So it's learning, take one step forward and be guided by those values.
I usually encapsulate at the end that final message, but you just did it for me. So thank you. That was perfect. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. This episode, I'm looking at my notes here, and I have so many things circled, Jason. And I take a lot of notes on, I want to make sure I get your parents' names and kids' names and all that. So if we refer back to them, but this one has so many actual learning circled that I'm going to go, holy cow. I don't know how I'm going to pick the title or how I'm going to pick the soundbite because there were so many perfect things that you said that I could put out there as a title or as a soundbite on social media. So, when we met last week, we had a really good conversation, and we've been texting back and forth, a little email back and forth, and I was really excited for our time this morning. And you are probably one of the more prepared guests I've ever had in my life, and I really appreciate that. You were amazing, man. You were amazing. This is a really, really good group. Tons of nuggets of information here that anybody can use. And so I want to really go back to the Bamboo Pack audience, and please, for you listener out there, if you're driving, if you're on your treadmill, hiking, walking, or in your office, and you can't take notes, go back and listen to this episode again with a pad of paper and a pen, and really dissect the interesting things that were said. Making people feel like they're the center of attention. Eat that rock. Eat a rock. Capture those moments of happiness. Take the long view of life. And be that tortoise. At times, just keep moving forward, in continuous learning. I mean, learning. Take one step forward, tie it back to values and make sure you have your values, and realize that when you're out there in life and you're performing and you're doing your job, you might have done it 1,000 times, but the people who are benefiting from it might only see it one time. So always bring your A game. I guess the best thing I could say is every day, ask yourself the questions Jason asks Hannah and Jack. What made you happy today? And what did you learn today? That is life-changing, life-enhancing advice right there. So Jason, I just want to take the time. I'm going to spend a few minutes with you after we're done recording here today, but I just want to take the time on air to thank you for being a very, 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 very powerful guest on the Bamboo Lab podcast.
Brian, it's been a pleasure, and I did prepare, and part of the reason behind it is that I want to make sure that I'm adding value back to something that motivates and drives me. And this is something I believe in. The things I've shared today are things that have been impactful to me, and I'm hopeful that others, to your recommendation, will take some notes and can gain some value from this conversation.
There is no doubt that they will. There's no doubt. I can tell when I'm doing a podcast, an interview, I can tell how well it's going to be received. Obviously, I haven't done 1,000 of these or 1,500 like Joe Rogan, but I've done enough now to realize, okay, this one was very succinct and very clear, a lot of clarity to it, a lot of good direction. So I know personally I got a lot out of it. So I'm sure the guests or the Bamboo Pack member out there listening is going to get a great deal out of it too. So thank you again, my friend.
You're welcome, Brian.
All right, Bamboo Pack member out there, I just want to take the time to thank you for tuning in this week. I appreciate each and every single one of you. I really do. I want to ask you if you please smash that like button on Spotify, Audible, YouTube, iHeartRadio, all the platforms around, whatever you listen to it, hit that like button. Please rate and review, and please send this episode off to 3 people you love. Whether you email it, share it through your platform, or text it to somebody. Please share it. This is life-changing material. People you love and care about need to hear this. And I'll see you in a week. But in the meantime, please get out there and sculpt your life. Get out there to strive to be your best. Show love and respect to others. And please, by all means, live intentionally. Until next time, I love and appreciate each and every one of you.